Hey there, and welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the insights you need to truly understand the world around us. Today, we're plunging into really one of the most compelling and complex stories of our time, the meteoric rise of Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman. We've got a fascinating stack of material for you, primarily drawing from Blood and Oil, Mohammed bin Salman's Ruthless quest. It's an in-depth look at a figure who is, well, both a revolutionary reformer and, to his critics, a controversial strongman, often described with starkly contrasting labels like deranged or heroic. Our mission today is really to unpack that paradox.
Indeed. And the narrative around Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS as he's widely known, it often gets reduced to these simple caricatures, doesn't it? We'd be looking at the money, the power, the pivotal moments that shaped his quest for control, exploring how his actions, from economic overhauls to these dramatic crackdowns, have reshaped not just Saudi Arabia, but also its place on the global stage.
Exactly. You probably heard whispers, read headlines, maybe seen his face on magazine covers. But what does it all really mean? For the kingdom, the region, even the global economy, we're going to try and take you behind the curtain, looking at the driving forces behind this incredibly powerful and, polarizing figure. So let's unpack this. Okay, so our story begins not with a king, but with a young prince driven by a surprisingly relatable emotion: anxiety about money. Our sources tell us that at just 15, the future leader learned his powerful father, Prince Salman, was actually deeply in debt by Saudi standards. This was apparently the first shock and challenge of his life, sparking this fierce desire to be richer than Al-Walid bin Talal in 2 years. Wild, right?
It really is a fascinating detail, isn't it? It makes you wonder, how does a prince in one of the world's wealthiest royal families end up facing that kind of insecurity? To put that in perspective, it sort of speaks to the nature of the Al Saud dynasty itself. The traditional system of succession, where the throne passed from older brother to older brother among the founder sons, Ibn Saud, it created this vast, sprawling family. We're talking maybe 7,000 princes and princesses.
Wow, 7,000.
Yeah. And many felt entitled to a share of the huge oil profits, but crucially, not all were equally wealthy. This often led to, a geriatric leadership, sometimes indecisive, and for some, like Salman, it meant significant financial strain even with their political standing.
Right, and King Abdullah, Salman's predecessor, he actually tried to bring some order to this with something called the Allegiance Council. It was designed to elect a crown prince and a deputy, but as Abdullah was fading, this was late 2014, his inner circle, including this really powerful royal court chief, Khalid al-Tuwaijri.
Tuwaijri.
Yeah, exactly. They saw an ambitious millennial like Mohammed as, a potential disaster. Tuwaijri even spread rumors, apparently, that Salman had dementia, really trying to block Mohammed's path and, protect his own clan's access to power and money.
And it's crucial here to understand King Salman's own background. He was known as a wily palace operator. He'd been the family enforcer for 50 years, had this vast network, meticulous files on other princes.
The infamous file.
Exactly. But he also had a soft spot for Mohammed. Almost saw him like a grandson, maybe because of their nearly 50-year age gap. Salman, remember, he was governor of Riyadh for 48 years. He valued diverse viewpoints, even held 3 weekly majlis, these traditional assemblies, 1 for religious scholars, 2 for commoners. He had listened to everyone, even the book says Bangladeshi street sweepers. But he had this deep disdain for non-royals like Tuwaijri, who acted like they were royalty.
So when King Abdullah finally passed, January 2015, the landscape changed. Dramatically and fast. Salman becomes king. Almost immediately, Tuwaijri, that powerful court chief who opposed Mohammed, he's out, removed. And Mohammed, now chief of his father's court, he's powering through nights, making calls, holding meetings. I mean, there was no doubt this was his moment too, not just his elderly father's.
The speed, the decisiveness, it was truly unprecedented. Within months, King Salman announces his brother Mukrin is stepping down from the line of succession. Then Mohammed bin Nayef, MBN, who is a key U.S. ally, often called the most pro-American prince ever to be in line to the throne.
Right, the counterterrorism guy.
That's him. He becomes crown prince. But critically, Mohammed bin Salman is made deputy crown prince and commander of the armed forces, effectively second in line. This immediately set up this extraordinary power dynamic. You had 2 men, different fathers, standing in the direct line for the throne. Very unusual.
And you saw this new power flexed almost immediately, didn't you?
Yep.
March 2015, just weeks later, really. MBS orders the most ambitious military campaign in Saudi history, the bombing of Yemen. Our sources report the U.S. was caught completely flat-footed, just genuinely surprised by this leader who seemed perfectly comfortable dropping bombs, with or without American backing.
Uh-huh.
It was such a clear signal of a new, much more assertive kind of Saudi leadership.
Hmm.
Just emerged out of nowhere, seemingly.
That's a really key observation. It makes you ask, how did a prince who was barely on the U.S. radar suddenly get empowered to make these huge, geopolitically significant decisions so quickly? It really reflected MBS's intensive study of strongman figures, American business tycoons, combined with this, well, brazenness that just shocked international observers. U.S. officials who were used to cautious, consensus-driven princes, they were scrambling, trying to figure out who this guy was. They noted his confidence, unusual for someone so young and new to that level.
And beyond the military stuff, MBS was apparently transfixed by global business finance. He initiated these huge economic plans like Vision 2030, this sweeping bid to shift Saudi Arabia away from oil dependence. He hired top-tier consultants, McKinsey and others, initially seen as collaborators, designing what he hoped would be a modern Saudi institution for his own foundation, MISK, and other projects.
The sheer ambition is what's striking. Taking a chunk of Aramco, the world's largest oil company, public, using that cash to invest in totally new industries. I mean, these were revolutionary ideas for a country that hadn't even outlawed slavery until 1962.
Yeah, put it in perspective.
Right. But the sources highlight a critical point about the consultants. While smart, they had this intrinsic conflict of interest. They were essentially mercenaries. They made money by getting assigned to giant projects, not by telling a powerful prince, hey, maybe this outlandish scheme won't work. MBS himself even noted, apparently, that most consultants wouldn't actually live in Saudi Arabia. Made him question trusting the country's future to them.
Which brings us to Neom, this completely new, futuristic city planned for the Red Sea coast, described as an entire new city built from scratch with technology in its DNA. It's supposed to have, flying robot taxis?
Animatronic Jurassic Park?
Right, and medical advances to increase human strength and IQ.
Yeah.
Just incredible stuff.
SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son, a key investor, apparently called MBS the Bedouin Steve Jobs. High praise, or perhaps hyperbole.
Perhaps.
From a broader economic view, these projects are designed to stop economic leakage. Saudis spending billions abroad on resorts, healthcare, luxury goods. The goal is keep that money home, attract huge foreign investment. But the reality for Aramco, for instance, was miles away from a typical public company. Its records were disorganized. Accountability was only to the king, not shareholders. It often prioritized vanity projects.
Like the billion-dollar sports city.
Exactly, or the $55 million Camel Beauty pageant. And it apparently gave away fuel at a loss. These are just not standard practices for a publicly traded company. Highlights the massive challenge.
Okay, so alongside these huge economic visions, MBS also brought in significant social reforms. The religious police, the Hayya, they kind of disappeared from public view pretty early, around 2016. Women were allowed to drive in 2018. Concerts, movie theaters, unbanned. He publicly pledged a return to moderate, open-minded Islam, arguing the country got pushed into extreme conservatism after the 1979 Grand Mosque attack.
And the intriguing part here is the nature of these changes. I mean, certainly welcomed by many, but the reforms were strictly top-down, the critical missing piece. Any mention of civil or political freedom, criticizing the monarchy, publicly questioning MBS's policies, that became a serious crime. It sent a clear message. Reform comes from the top only. Don't think you can get rights through protest. You had preachers like Salman who had 13 million Twitter followers, just thrown into solitary confinement for his unwillingness to hew to the royal family's messaging. A chilling example.
Yeah. And MBS wasn't shy about using that iron fist to enforce those limits. The Ritz-Carlton arrests, November 2017. That was a watershed moment. Hundreds of prominent figures, princes, ministers, businessmen, including Walid bin Talal, rounded up, detained in this luxury hotel. MBS said it was about corruption, but many observers saw it as, a calculated move. Consolidate power, neutralize rivals, maybe using info from Salman's old files.
And the really crucial point about those arrests is this idea of the rules changing retroactively. Deals approved by previous kings, suddenly called misdeeds. Past agreements became grounds for detention. Princes like Meteb bin Abdullah, King Abdullah's son, accused of transferring billions in National Guard land to his family foundation, had to settle to get out. Prince Sultan bin Turki II, who'd sued the family before over an earlier abduction,
He got abducted again.
forcibly taken from his plane, yes. And the sources mention a really chilling detail. One detainee, General Ali Al-Qahtani, allegedly died from torture during the crackdown.
It was a game changer, as Jamal Khashoggi initially described it, a swift cleanup. But wow, the methods were extreme. We also saw MBS's dark arts extend into cyber espionage. Royal court associates like Bader al-Assakar allegedly paid Twitter employees. One was a U.S.-educated tech guy, Ali al-Zabara,
Right.
paid them to access user info, spy on dissidents like this figure, Mushtahid, and Omar Bolaziz. The FBI even got involved, but al-Zabara was apparently whisked away to Riyadh, later worked for Mohammed's foundation, Miska, doing what? Monitoring and manipulating social media.
And this led to the rise of figures like Saud al-Qahtani, known as Mr. Hashtag, attacking critics with literal armies of Twitter bots, a whole apparatus of digital control.
Internationally, MBS was also playing a strategic game, cultivating key relationships. With President Obama, things were strained, mostly because of the Iran nuclear deal, which Saudi Arabia and the UAE felt ignored their security concerns. But with the Trump administration, wow, MBS found a direct line. Figures like Jared Kushner, Steve Bannon, they were eager to bypass the traditional diplomats, the so-called deep state.
And what's crucial to grasp here is the highly transactional nature of this new U.S. relationship. MBS saw his chance, positioned himself as a new kind of leader, understood money, technology, appealed directly to the Trump administration's way of thinking. The Saudis orchestrated Trump's first foreign visit, huge spectacle. Projected Trump's face on the Ritz-Carlton, arranged $500 billion in deals. Yet one U.S. official observed, kind of tellingly, that MBS couldn't really go more than one layer down on the substance of his economic plans, revealed maybe a lack of depth despite all the confidence.
And this transactional, pretty aggressive approach, it extended to regional conflicts too, notably the Qatar blockade in 2017. Saudi Arabia and the UAE accused Qatar of funding radical ideology, supporting groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, Hezbollah. The pretext was a hack of the Qatar news agency, possibly by Russian cyber mercenaries, quickly amplified by Saudi and Emirati news outlets.
Zooming out a bit, the U.S. Secretary of State at the time, Rex Tillerson, he understood Qatar's strategic importance. I mean, it hosts America's biggest airbase in the Middle East. He tried to mediate, emphasize the humanitarian crisis, the risk of Gulf countries using U.S. weapons against each other.
Yeah, that seems sensible.
But President Trump apparently just dismissed his concerns, famously said, "I don't give a fuck about milk," referring to shortages. He saw it as a way to get them to fight over who funds terrorism less, which, of course, emboldened MBS and MBZ Mohammed bin Zayed of Abu Dhabi to push even harder. They even floated the idea of digging a canal to turn Qatar into an island. Shows a pretty dangerous disregard for regional stability.
But the most devastating international crisis for MBS, no question, was the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, October 2018. Khashoggi, who had initially supported some of MBS's reforms, became a very vocal critic after moving to the U.S., started writing columns for the Washington Post. Headlines like, "Saudi Arabia wasn't always this repressive, now it's unbearable." Pretty direct.
And it makes you ask, why did Khashoggi become such a profound threat? Well, in the eyes of MBS's security advisors, he was becoming a great unifier of opposition, precisely because he had been an insider. His ties to Turkish politicians, a U.S. foundation linked to Qatar, these were seen as evidence he was working with foreign powers. The CIA later concluded MBS probably ordered his death. They cited messages to Saud al-Qahtani, Mr. Hashtag, and a chilling statement MBS supposedly made months before the killing, that if Khashoggi wouldn't return, they could possibly lure him outside Saudi Arabia and make arrangements.
Ugh, and the details of the murder. Involving a bone saw, the dismemberment inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, it sparked global outrage. Understandably, Turkish President Erdogan may be trying to unseat MBS from succession. He meticulously drip-fed information to the press. Despite MBS's denials, the nickname Mr. Bonesaw stuck. The incident caused a huge backlash. People like Ari Emanuel canceling $400 million in investments, Richard Branson pulling out of Saudi projects. Sure, there was an international cost. Yet, despite that global condemnation over Khashoggi, MBS just kept consolidating power. Removed rivals like Khalid al-Falih from Aramco, replaced him with his own older brother, Abdulaziz bin Salman. He even acquired these lavish toys like the $450 million Salvatore Mundi painting, supposedly by Leonardo da Vinci.
Right, purchased by his close friend Badir bin Farhan al Saud.
The idea was to showcase Saudi Arabia as a new cultural colossus, attract tourism, boost the kingdom's image, even though, the painting's Christian themes might offend some Wahhabist clerics.
And the really intriguing thing here is how deeply MBS has woven himself and Saudi money into the global economy. His public investment fund, the PIF, has poured billions into U.S. infrastructure, tech companies like Tesla, SoftBank's Vision Fund, which then invested in companies like WeWork and Wag, not exactly traditional tech.
Right.
This deep integration meant that even after Khashoggi, many global business leaders, despite maybe some initial hesitation, they started to see him as, well, unstoppable, vital to the global economy. One billionaire was even quoted saying starkly, "One person's life doesn't matter unless it's MBS's. Khashoggi doesn't matter." Really illustrates the pragmatism or maybe cynicism of global capital.
And that story continues today. We've seen MBS keep grappling with challenges, like the Abqaiq oil facility attack in 2019, which kind of exposed disarray in Saudi defenses, partly because the military was split among factions, and the ongoing family dramas, like the detention of Saad al-Jabri's children, still apparently imprisoned without charges. Our sources say he uses surveys now to identify reputational problems, like the detention of women activists, the Yemen war, the Qatar boycott, treats them almost like numbers on a chart to be solved for global status.
And to put that in perspective, MBS has apparently admitted in private conversations to being too thin-skinned and maybe too worried about dissidents in his early years. But he consistently maintains that reforms must come from the top to maintain Al Saud power. His investments in longevity research even led him to suggest he might live hundreds of years as ruler.
Wow.
Yeah, it highlights this potent blend of grand vision, ruthless pragmatism, and a really long-term strategy centered on personal control and radical national transformation.
So what does this all mean for you, the informed learner, trying to make sense of it all? The story of Mohammed bin Salman is, well, it's a profound paradox. He's undeniably a figure of immense change, pushing social, economic reforms that were just unimaginable a decade ago. But he's also an enforcer. Ruthlessly consolidated power, silenced dissent, reshaped alliances in dramatic, often brutal ways. The key takeaway, I think, is how MBS has leveraged ambition, incredible wealth, and an iron will to forge a new Saudi Arabia, one that demands global attention and, yeah, sometimes causes global discomfort.
Which leaves us with a really important question for you to consider. In a world grappling with information overload and with leaders who really challenge constitutional norms, how do you weigh that promise of radical transformation against the cost of absolute control? Is it even possible to separate the vision from the methods, or are they just inextricably linked in the pursuit and maintenance of power?
It certainly gives you a lot to think about, doesn't it? As Saudi Arabia continues its journey, led by a prince who seems to view some of the world's biggest challenges as, yeah, numbers on a chart to be solved. The ripple effects, wow, they'll be felt globally for decades to come. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope this exploration has given you a clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding of this complex and really influential figure. Keep digging, keep questioning, keep learning.
Until next time, stay curious.